Opening scene. The brutal betrayal. It all began on that fateful night, a night so cruel and merciless that it felt like the universe had conspired against me. I was lured into what seemed like an ordinary meeting with someone I trusted, a man who claimed to be my friend, but turned out to be my greatest enemy. Little did I know, this encounter would leave me stripped of everything, my dignity, my pride, and even the clothes on my back. As soon as I arrived at the deserted alley where we were supposed to meet, I realized too late that something was horribly wrong. Before I could react, two shadowy figures emerged from the darkness, their faces obscured by hoods. They pounced on me without warning, their fists raining down blows with savage precision. Each punch felt like a hammer striking steel, shattering not just my body, but also my spirit. My screams for help went unanswered in the dead silence of the city streets. When they finally stopped, leaving me battered and gasping for air, one of them sneered, "This is what you get for thinking you can play games with us." With those chilling words, they tore off my clothes, leaving me completely naked and vulnerable. And then, as if the humiliation wasn't enough, they dumped me in the middle of a busy street under the harsh glare of neon lights. The cold pavement burned against my skin, and the piercing stares of passers-by cut deeper than any blade ever could. Some laughed, others pointed fingers, while a few simply walked away, pretending not to notice. But every pair of eyes felt like daggers piercing through my soul. My head throbbed with pain, and my vision blurred as tears of shame streamed down my face. I wanted to disappear, to sink into the ground and never resurface. For the first time in my life, I truly understood what it meant to hit rock bottom. Fateful encounter, the woman's cold rejection. As I stood there, trembling and exposed under the unforgiving neon lights, my eyes desperately scanned the crowd for a glimmer of compassion. That's when I saw her, a woman, walking briskly down the street, her coat wrapped tightly around her as if shielding herself from the world. She looked like an angel to me, a beacon of hope in this nightmare. Summoning every ounce of courage I had left, I stumbled toward her, my voice cracking with desperation. "Please help me," I begged, reaching out a hand that shook uncontrollably. But instead of kindness, she froze, her lips curling into a sneer. "Are you serious right now?" She spat, her tone dripping with disdain. "Do you think I'm stupid enough to fall for whatever game you're playing?" Her words hit me like another punch to the gut, but it was the laughter that followed that truly broke me. A small group of onlookers had begun to gather, their whispers growing louder, their stares more intrusive. One man even pulled out his phone, no doubt recording the spectacle for social media. My heart raced as panic surged through my veins. Every second felt like an eternity, each mocking comment slicing deeper into what little remained of my dignity. The woman crossed her arms, her expression hardening further. "You disgust me," she continued, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Men like you, pathetic, manipulative creatures who prey on others' weaknesses. You probably got exactly what you deserved." Her accusation stung because, deep down, I knew she wasn't entirely wrong. Yet, hearing those words spoken aloud, especially by someone whose help I so desperately needed, made me feel like I was drowning in shame. Just then, a child's voice pierced through the chaos. "Mommy, why is he naked?" A little boy asked innocently, tugging at the woman's sleeve. Her face softened momentarily before snapping back into its cold mask. "Stay away from him, sweetheart," she warned, pulling the boy closer to her side. The gesture felt like a final blow, solidifying my status as someone unworthy of trust or sympathy. But just as despair threatened to consume me entirely, something shifted in her gaze. For a brief moment, I saw hesitation flicker across her features, as though she were battling some internal conflict. Perhaps it was the raw vulnerability in my eyes or the sheer absurdity of the situation. But whatever it was, it gave me a sliver of hope. Before she could say anything, however, a man from the crowd stepped forward, pointing accusingly at me. "Hey, isn't this the guy who ruined your marriage?" he shouted, directing his question at the woman. The tension skyrocketed instantly, and I realized with mounting dread that my past sins had caught up with me once again. Unexpected setback, the broken car, and the relentless rain. After what felt like an eternity of pleading and enduring her biting words, the woman finally relented. Her expression softened slightly, though skepticism still lingered in her eyes. "Fine," she muttered under her breath, pulling off her coat and tossing it to me. "Cover yourself up before someone calls the cops." I caught the coat with trembling hands, grateful for even this small act of mercy. It wasn't much, but it shielded me from the prying eyes of the crowd that had grown around us. She grabbed my arm firmly, dragging me toward a sleek black car parked at the curb. For a moment, hope flickered within me. Perhaps things were about to get better. But fate, as if mocking our fragile optimism, had other plans. As we approached the vehicle, she pressed the key fob, expecting the headlights to flash and the engine to hum to life. Instead, there was only silence. She tried again, pressing harder, her brow furrowing in frustration. Then came the dreaded realization: the car was dead. A low growl escaped her lips as she kicked the tire in anger. "Of course," she muttered bitterly, "because why wouldn't today be absolutely perfect?" The rain began to fall, then light at first, but quickly escalating into a torrential downpour. Fat drops pelted us relentlessly, soaking through our clothes within minutes. My borrowed coat clung to my skin, offering little protection against the icy deluge. We stood there, drenched and shivering, staring at the useless hunk of metal that had promised salvation just moments ago. The irony was almost too cruel to bear. Here we were, two broken souls seeking refuge, and now we were stranded in the middle of nowhere, abandoned not just by people, but by circumstance itself. "Now what?" I asked weakly, my voice barely audible over the drumming rain. She didn't answer immediately, her jaw clenched as she scanned the desolate street for any sign of hope. There were no taxis, no buses, no friendly faces willing to lend a hand. Just endless rows of darkened buildings and empty sidewalks glistening under the storm's fury. Finally, she turned to me, her gaze sharp and resolute. "We walk," she declared flatly. And so we did. Each step felt heavier than the last, our sodden shoes squelching against the pavement as water pulled around our feet. The cold seeped into my bones, gnawing at me like a relentless predator. Every movement sent jolts of pain through my battered body, but stopping wasn't an option. Behind us, the taillights of passing cars disappeared into the distance, their drivers oblivious to our plight. Ahead, the horizon remained shrouded in darkness, offering no promise of shelter or relief. As we trudged along, the tension between us thickened. Neither of us spoke, the weight of our shared misfortune hanging heavily in the air. Occasionally, lightning would split the sky, illuminating her face briefly. In those fleeting flashes, I could see the exhaustion etched into her features, the same weariness that mirrored my own despair. Yet beneath it all, there was something else, a flicker of resilience, perhaps, or maybe just stubborn determination. Whatever it was, it gave me a strange sense of comfort, knowing I wasn't entirely alone in this nightmare. Finally, after what seemed like hours, we spotted a dim light glowing faintly in the distance. It belonged to a dilapidated gas station, its windows cracked and its roof sagging under the weight of time. Without hesitation, we stumbled inside, collapsing onto the grimy floor as the warmth of the interior enveloped us. The attendant, a grizzled old man with a cigarette dangling from his lips, eyed us suspiciously but said nothing. For the first time since this ordeal began, I allowed myself to breathe. But even as the immediate danger subsided, I couldn't shake the feeling that our troubles were far from over. Dark pasts unveiled, confessions in the shadows. The dim, flickering light of the gas station cast eerie shadows on the cracked walls as we sat there, soaked to the bone and shivering. The silence between us was heavy, punctuated only by the rhythmic dripping of rainwater from our clothes onto the grimy floor. It was then that I realized this moment wasn't just about survival, it was about trust. Or at least it needed to be. Summoning every ounce of courage I had left, I turned to her, my voice trembling not from the cold, but from the weight of what I was about to say. "I need to tell you something," I began hesitantly, my gaze fixed on the puddle forming at my feet. "Something terrible." She didn't respond, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if bracing herself for another lie. But this time, I couldn't afford to hold back. "It's true I seduced your husband, but it wasn't just him. I've done it before. To others. Too many others." My words hung in the air like a storm cloud, dark and suffocating. I've ruined families, shattered marriages, destroyed lives. And now, my voice broke, tears stinging my eyes. Now I see how much pain I've caused, how selfish and cruel I've been. For a moment, she said nothing, her expression unreadable. Then, with a bitter laugh, she leaned back against the wall, shaking her head. "You think I don't know what it feels like to have everything taken away?" Her voice rose, sharp and cutting. "My husband betrayed me with someone like you. He threw me out into the streets one freezing night in the pouring rain, without even a coat or a single penny to my name. Do you know what that feels like? To be discarded like trash by the person who swore to love you forever?" Her confession hit me like a punch to the chest, leaving me breathless. I could picture it vividly, the biting wind, the icy rain soaking through her skin, the loneliness clawing at her soul. And yet, here she was, sitting across from me, still finding the strength to help a stranger. A stranger who didn't deserve it. "But why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you even consider helping someone like me after everything you've been through?" She looked at me then, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and sadness. "Because maybe, just maybe, I see a chance for redemption for both of us. You're not the only one carrying guilt, you know." I stayed silent when I saw cracks in my marriage. I ignored the signs because I was too scared to face the truth. Maybe if I'd acted sooner, things would have been different. Her honesty stunned me. Here we were, two broken people bound together by our mistakes, each carrying burdens too heavy to bear alone. For the first time, I understood that my sins weren't isolated. They were part of a larger web of pain and betrayal that touched everyone involved. As the rain continued to pour outside, washing away the filth from the world beyond, I felt an overwhelming urge to change. Not for myself, but for her, for the woman who had shown me a glimpse of humanity despite my darkness. Climactic conflict, the husband's unexpected arrival. The temporary apartment we had found ourselves in was far from luxurious, a cramped, musty space with peeling wallpaper and creaky floorboards that groaned under every step. But after hours of wandering through the rain-soaked streets, it felt like a sanctuary. We were both exhausted, our clothes still damp and clinging to our skin, but there was a fragile sense of calm between us. For the first time since our fateful encounter, we weren't fighting the elements or battling our own demons. That fleeting peace, however, was shattered when the door burst open without warning. Standing in the doorway was her husband, flanked by two burly men whose muscular frames filled the narrow frame of the entrance. His eyes burned with fury as they landed on me, his jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscles twitching beneath his skin. "What the hell is this?" he roared, storming into the room like a raging bull. The sound of his voice echoed off the walls, amplifying the tension that now crackled in the air. Behind him, The two men cracked their knuckles menacingly, ready to strike at his command. Before I could respond, the woman stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. "Stop it, David," she said firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. "This isn't what it looks like." "Oh, really?" he sneered, turning his glare toward her. "Then why are you here with him? What? Did you forget how I threw you out last night? You think running back to another man is going to fix everything? It's not like that." She protested, but her words fell on deaf ears. He advanced toward me, his fists clenched, his nostrils flaring with rage. You bastard," he spat, jabbing a finger into my chest. "How dare you try to get close to my wife after everything you've done? Do you have any idea what you've put her through?" I wanted to explain, to defend myself, but the weight of his accusations pressed down on me like an invisible force. How could I argue against the truth? I had wronged them, both of them, and now I stood face to face with the consequences of my actions. "Call the police," David barked over his shoulder to one of the men. "Tell them we caught this scumbag trying to seduce a married woman. Let's see how long he lasts in jail." Panic surged through me as the reality of the situation hit home. Jail? No, this couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when I was finally beginning to understand the depth of my mistakes. I looked at the woman, silently pleading for help, but she seemed frozen, torn between loyalty to her husband and sympathy for me. "You don't understand," I stammered, raising my hands in surrender. I'm not the same person anymore. I've changed." David laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "Changed? You expect me to believe that? Men like you don't change. You destroy lives, then crawl back, begging for forgiveness once you're caught. Well, not this time." As the man reached for his phone to dial the authorities, something inside me snapped. This wasn't just about survival, it was about proving that redemption was possible, even for someone like me. Summoning every ounce of courage, I took a step forward, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through my veins. "If you call the police, fine," I said, meeting David's gaze head on. "But know this, I've spent my life ruining others' happiness, including yours. And I'll spend the rest of my days making amends if I have to. But don't let your anger blind you to the possibility that people can change if they truly want to." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the room. Even the rain outside seemed to pause, holding its breath along with us. Then slowly, David lowered his phone, his expression unreadable. Profound psychological shift, a test of loyalty and fear. As David's phone hovered in the air, the room seemed to shrink around me. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear its echo in my ears. The thought of being arrested, of losing everything, including any chance at redemption, sent waves of sheer terror coursing through my veins. My mind raced with images of cold prison bars, mocking faces, and endless nights spent replaying my sins over and over again. Would they believe me if I told them I had changed? Or would they see me as nothing more than a predator unworthy of mercy? I turned to her, desperation etched into every line on my face. "Please," I whispered hoarsely, my voice cracking under the weight of my fear. "You know, I'm not the same man anymore." But she didn't respond immediately. Her eyes darted between me and David, her expression torn. She clenched her fists tightly as though trying to hold herself together amidst the chaos. This was her moment of reckoning, a choice that would define not just her loyalty, but also her humanity. David sneered, breaking the tension-filled silence. "Don't waste your breath on her," he spat. "She knows exactly who you are, a liar, a cheat, a destroyer of lives. And now, thanks to you, she's homeless too." His words struck like daggers, forcing both of us to confront the harsh reality we were trapped in. For a fleeting second, I saw doubt flicker across her face. Was she questioning whether saving me was worth risking everything? Could she forgive herself for choosing a stranger over her own husband, the man who, despite his flaws, still held a piece of her past? Then, without warning, she stepped forward, placing herself between me and David. Enough, she shouted, her voice trembling yet resolute. If you call the police, then you'll have to deal with me too. Because unlike you, I believe people can change if they truly want to. Her declaration stunned everyone in the room, including herself. For a moment, time stood still. The rain outside resumed its relentless assault against the windows, mirroring the storm raging within her. She had chosen not out of obligation, but out of hope. Hope that even someone like me deserved a second chance. David stared at her, incredulous. You're defending him? After everything he's done? Yes, she replied firmly, meeting his gaze head on. Because while you've been busy punishing others, I've been learning what it means to forgive. An open-ended ending full of hope, a new beginning amidst uncertainty. The confrontation with David had left both of us shaken, but it also marked a turning point, a moment when the truth could no longer be ignored. As we stood there in the dimly lit apartment, the weight of our shared past hung heavily in the air like an unspoken promise neither of us was ready to break. The storm outside had finally subsided, leaving behind a cold, eerie calm that mirrored the fragile peace settling between us. I can't stay here, she whispered after what felt like an eternity of silence. Her voice was soft yet resolute, as if she were speaking more to herself than to me. If I do, I'll end up right back where I started, trapped in a life that doesn't belong to me. Her words struck a chord deep within me. She wasn't just talking about escaping David. She was acknowledging something far greater, the need to escape the shadows of our own making. We had both been prisoners of our choices, bound by guilt and regret. But now, for the first time, I saw a glimmer of hope, not just for her, but for us. And where will you go? I asked cautiously, afraid of shattering the delicate balance we had somehow managed to achieve. Away, she replied simply, her gaze fixed on the cracked window pane. Somewhere no one knows who we are or what we've done. Somewhere we can start over. The idea terrified me. Leaving everything behind meant stepping into the unknown, facing challenges neither of us could predict. Yet, at the same time, it offered a chance at redemption, a blank slate upon which we could rewrite our lives. It wasn't going to be easy. People didn't just forget their mistakes overnight, and neither would we. But maybe, just maybe, we could learn to live with them differently. What about your husband? I ventured hesitantly, dreading the answer. She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. He's not my husband anymore, not really. Not since he threw me out into the streets without a second thought. If anything, this is my chance to prove to myself that I'm stronger than the person he thought I was. Her determination ignited something inside me, a spark of courage I hadn't felt in years. For so long, I had convinced myself that change was impossible, that I was destined to remain the villain in everyone else's story. But seeing her resolve, her willingness to fight for a better future despite everything, made me realize that perhaps I too could rise above my flaws. We'll leave together, I said suddenly, surprising even myself. Not because we owe each other anything, but because maybe we're exactly what the other needs right now. She turned to look at me then, her eyes searching mine for any trace of deceit. What she found instead was sincerity, a raw, unfiltered desire to make amends, not only for her sake, but for my own. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. Okay, she said softly. But know this, if you screw up, if you try to hurt anyone ever again, I won't hesitate to walk away. This isn't just about starting over. It's about becoming someone worth trusting. Her ultimatum should have scared me off, but instead, it fueled my resolve. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be smooth. There would be sleepless nights filled with doubt, moments when the weight of our past threatened to pull us under. But I also knew that staying put would mean surrendering to the same toxic patterns that had brought us here in the first place. By morning, we had packed what little we owned, a few changes of clothes, some cash scraped together from the remnants of our old lives, and set off toward an uncertain future. The city skyline faded into the distance as we drove, its towering buildings replaced by open roads and endless possibilities. Neither of us spoke much during the journey, but the silence between us was no longer heavy. Instead, it carried a quiet sense of purpose, a shared understanding that while the path ahead would be difficult, it was ours to forge. As the sun rose over the horizon, casting golden light across the landscape, I allowed myself to imagine what lay ahead. It wouldn't be perfect. In fact, it might never be. But for the first time in a long time, I felt alive, not as the man I used to be, but as the man I hoped to become.